Well, welcome to another Discover Headless Tech interview from headlesscreator.com. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Send me any questions, comments, ideas you have. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today's conversation is all about composable commerce, what it is, and why it's important for your enterprise. With my guest, Tomas Krag, he's the CTO at D2C and Digital, and you'll meet him in just a minute. But before we get started, you know how this works. I got to tell you about headlesscreator.com and why you need your free account there. Go get it. Like I mentioned, it's a free account. Once you sign up, you'll have access to listen to the entire podcast, all the episodes. But not only that, you also have access to basically all the content on headlesscreator.com, including Content Modeling Weekly course, the Discover Headless Tech course, all of the Focus On courses, which focus on a variety of headless CMSs, many more coming online soon. Boot camps, we got tons of boot camps. Well, not tons, we got 2 boot camps, but we're going to have tons of boot camps for you. And we're going to have a new one actually coming up on composable commerce as well. So stay tuned for that one. That'll be coming out soon. So go get your free account. You'll have access to all of this and you'll enjoy it and you'll learn a lot of stuff. Also, a real quick reminder for those of you watching live, that you can actually type in questions in the chat. If you have any questions, I'll ask Thomas once we bring him in and we start the conversation. So type it in there and I'll get Thomas to answer those questions. Having said that, let's bring on Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be on this headlesscreator.com.
I'm glad to have you here. You know, this is a really hot topic, something that is really important, really for all enterprises, small, medium, and large, right? And I think this is something that we need to really understand really well. But before we do that, I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. Give me a little, where are you located, first of all?
Yeah, so I'm based in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Cool. So what time is it over there?
It's 4:30 p.m.
4:30 p.m. Okay, it's about 7:30 in the morning here in Southern California. So I can see you guys have a beautiful day over there. I can see by the windows.
It's pretty lovely.
Yeah, it sounds like it looks like it. So give us a little background about yourself. How did you get into technology? What attracted you to technology?
Sure. I've worked in technology my whole career since basically the late 90s. I studied computer science and business administration at business school and went straight into sort of the very early days of web development in 1997. So essentially came at that from a developer background, but sort of gradually transitioned into encompassing more of the business side as well. So that's sort of I guess what brought me to technology is I was a very early computer geek. So we had, Commodore 64s and ZX Spectrums and computers as kids and played around with those. And that was sort of a love affair, I think, that's lasted a lifetime now.
We had a very similar path. I had a VIC-20, then the Commodore 64, then the Apple II Plus, and migrated. But I got into the web also in '97, around that time. So I still remember the Blink tag. I was so excited to see that interactivity back then.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember that as well.
Those were the days, yeah.
Those were the days, right? CGI, Perl, and all that kind of stuff. That no frameworks back then. No frameworks whatsoever. Yeah, we were creating those for every project, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Well, why don't we jump in? Currently, what are you currently working on? I mean, how did you get into commerce? And then we'll jump into the conversation about Composable.
So I actually started working with commerce very early in 1999. I was on the agency side here in Copenhagen. We did some of the first commerce solutions for brands here. Then sort of stepped away from that, did other digital projects, mobile apps, worked in the nonprofit side of things, working with technology in South Asia and Africa. And sort of gradually went back into the agency side in 2012, so 10 years ago now. Became the CTO of an agency in Denmark that's now part of Sapient, the Publicis Group, where we did a lot of sort of consultancy and building of commerce solutions. And then 4 years ago now, I got an opportunity to go be director of e-commerce at Bang & Olufsen, the Danish high-end audio brand, to sort of set up a new digital team and build a e-commerce platform. And that was sort of my first real headless project from beginning to end. And then my latest project has been for a bed company called Hilding Anders, working again on digital strategy, on building a headless e-commerce solution across multiple brands, taking some of the learnings from Bang & Olufsen. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the details of that later, and building web solutions there. And now I sort of at the moment, let's call me an independent consultant on omnichannel e-commerce. Both of the last 2 gigs I've done have revolved in the omnichannel space, so in companies that also do retail, which has been really interesting as well.
From a commerce perspective, without jumping into the composable part yet, but just from a commerce perspective, what are some of the skill sets a person needs to have versus just a straight website, right? When you're on a regular marketing website.
So I think, the commerce space, as it's grown in importance, and I think we've seen that acceleration, especially in the last couple of years with COVID, has become obviously broader and broader, and there are more and more skills needed. So teams are getting bigger and bigger with different skills. If we want to talk about specifically what's the difference between a marketing website and an e-commerce website, it's obviously about the transactions. So that says the capability of understanding customers on the level of sales. So we're talking about promotions, we're talking about merchandising. These are skills that are not required in a typical marketing website. On the other side, we're talking about finance, so the financial side of things, because obviously you're transacting. And lately, I think I find myself in a lot of conversations about supply chain, because companies are looking for ways to optimize on costs, since e-commerce shipping is quite expensive, but also very much to figure out how delivery and supply chain can become a competitive advantage. So I think I see more and more of that as well. So I think what we've seen is, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, you'd see 1 or 2 people run an e-commerce website, and now you can easily have a team of 12 with different skill sets, or much larger in some cases. Also, obviously, if you're running it globally, then
right,
that plays in as well.
Well, let's address a little bit about content as well, because we all usually think of commerce as you have a shopping cart and you have a product and it's got detail, but a lot of companies are going towards the content mentality, where you're presenting content and educating or informing, but through that, then you purchase, right? So what is the relationship between content and commerce, and how is that merging together?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. And I think, at a company like Bang & Olufsen, if you're a high-end brand, or even some of the bed brands I was working on at Hilding Anders, we're really trying to replicate a retail experience online, and content is central to that. There are things you cannot do. So, obviously, if you're selling high-end speakers, I cannot show you or give you a demo listen, but I can show you the product. I talk about the sound. I can talk about the craftsmanship. So I think more and more at Bang & Olufsen, we talked about it in the terms of story-led commerce. So we wanted to tell stories about our products, about how they were made, because craftsmanship is important, about how the sound was tuned by tone meisters. In the bed company, a high-end bed company, want to talk about how a bed is manufactured, what the raw materials are, to give a feel for the uniqueness of this bed. But we want those stories to be commerce enabled. So we don't what we may have seen a number of years ago is a content website. Maybe a company would have a marketing website. They might have a blog with articles, and then somewhere else they would have a shop. And that no longer works, because consumers are expecting a experience related to retail, and they don't have essentially the patience to move around in different segments of a website looking for those things. So I think in that sense, content is a super critical part of any modern e-commerce store. I mean, when I say any, obviously, if you have there are exceptions that are just about, quick retail, but I think you see more and more brands really investing in content, but integrating it into commerce.
And the other thing I want to bring up is also the point of where commerce begins. We always think of that commerce page, that product landing page, right? But really, to me, I'll give you an example. When I search for stuff, I go to YouTube and watch YouTube people tell me which is a good product. Like, let's say I want a microphone or whatever it may be, right? And then I go, I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds great. Let's go over there and get it, right? It ends at the product page. It doesn't start at the product page, right? It starts at a social media search or a YouTube video or whatever it may be. So, because to me, that's part of that composable mentality of not just composable in technology, but just, composable as to where do we begin? Where does that journey begin?
Yeah. I think customer journeys are definitely becoming more complex and more differentiated in the sense that, I mean, again, the last couple of companies I worked with were also retail companies, and when is a shopping experience in store, when is it online, and where does that begin? Because that experience you're talking about could then involve a visit to a store to feel a product, and the store then wants to own that transaction. But the truth is, if you buy something complicated, I recently bought a new barbecue, and I did all the research. I went to a store, I wanted to see it. It was a pretty big purchase, but at the end of the day, I make the purchasing decision on my own time frame, and once I've made the decision, I want to order it then and there. And if it's Friday night at 11 p.m., I want to be able to order it. I don't want to be forced back in the store, because then along the journey, each of those things, YouTube, the store, they all add value to me as a customer. But at the point where it doesn't add value, if you force me into that channel, maybe I'm going to drop the sale. So forcing me back to store just to hand over money might make me reconsider and buy something else entirely, or just skip the purchase because it's just not convenient. So I think there's a level of convenience. There's a level at which, as you said, product research is a much broader thing. There's also a level, I think, where consumers are expecting more consistency from brands. So if you have an app, and that goes back to content management and the headless discussion, because if you have an app and you have a website and you have in-store, there's an expectation that the brand experience is consistent. So the words we use, the images we use are the same. If we launch a campaign, that it's visible across channels. And really, the only way to handle that is through a centralized content management solution and some sort of headless integration, in my opinion.
100% agreed. Single source of truth, then you can do that across. So what is the difference between commerce and composable commerce? Let's start with that.
Yeah. So I think to sort of, for me to understand composable as such, there's Gartner introduced it, this idea of a packaged business functionality, which sort of, I think the idea is that you sort of take your business capabilities, something like a basket and checkout, and you consider that a single unit throughout the stack, and you build that technology essentially in isolation, so that works. And that means effectively that if you then want to use, so that has a couple of advantages compared to sort of the more monolithic mindset where you build an e-commerce store as a single unit. One thing is you can sort of have multiple teams working on different parts of it. So you can use an external agency to optimize the checkout flow, because you may not want to build that skill in-house, but they don't have to work on everything else on your e-commerce site. You can then use that same checkout system on your app. So one of the things, again, we did at Bang & Olufsen was we had an experience app that was just to sort of show off the products. And it was a pretty easy job for us to add commerce and checkout to that, because we had based everything on this idea of packaged business capabilities, and with APIs and that sort of thing. So I think, e-commerce itself could be, and that's probably right for a lot of shops. You can start with just a Shopify shop with some standard templates that you adapt, then you have a shop. But in that scenario, you can't reuse parts of that experience in other channels, so in apps or it could even be third-party retail. You can't reuse the content, but you also can't reuse the business capabilities. And almost more importantly, you really only can have one person or one small team work on the entire website, which may not be enough for a modern e-commerce solution, because the complexity can be increasing, and you want that type of separation.
Now you mentioned monoliths, which leads me to my next question about frameworks, right? Monoliths is one type of framework where everything comes together, right? It's all there provided for you. There are positives and there are negatives to that. So before we jump into the other types of frameworks, what are some of the positives of a monolith a framework versus a composable one?
Yeah. So I think if you talk about, I mean, I think it's important to say that these architectures or frameworks are in some sense all platonic ideals. So everything I see in the real world is usually a combination of the two,
Right.
or of different types of architectures and frameworks. But the monolithic idea is you buy a piece of software that does everything you need, essentially, be it Adobe or Salesforce or something that runs your e-commerce, runs your email marketing. And the advantages to a large degree are, you don't need to make a lot of decisions specific to your business. You can have faster time to market because you're basically buying a box solution with everything ready. There's a lot of standardization there. You're essentially paying to use the other clients' experiences as well, in some sense. And often, I think one of the big reasons that companies use them is that they often come wrapped in business services and consulting services. So you can sort of get the support to set it up as well. If you don't have the internal maturity, if you don't have the team in-house, you can set up a monolith and do deliver specific services pretty easily, but it can be expensive as well.
Right. And then what are some of the challenges with it?
So I think the big one for me, the one that everyone talks about is vendor lock-in. Of course, you become very dependent on that one vendor. You're handing over a lot of license costs. They make decisions about the roadmap of their product. You don't have much influence on that. So you're sort of dependent on them. It can be very hard to leave again if you grow dissatisfied. I think for me, actually, the big one is tied, you and me have both been in the digital space for a long time. And especially if you've worked on the agency side, you've seen these cycles of platforms. So for many years, you'd come in as an agency and they'd say, well, we need a new website. It's been 3 years or it's been 4 years, we're building a new website. And I think a lot of that impetus comes from this monolithic idea that you buy a fixed set of capabilities. You start off with requirements gathering. You put in a list of requirements that your e-commerce platform needs to deliver. Then you choose a vendor that lives up to those requirements.